Do you dream about changing the world? Do you dream about making it big? How far will your dreams take you? Let's talk about the Silicon Dreams. This is me, RJ Shara. Hello everyone, welcome to Radio Zindagi 1170 AM. I am RJ Shara and I have Joe Jasin with of DNA Partners with me today. You all are listening to the Silicon Dreams. I am glad to host Joe in the studios today. Joe is the managing director of DNA Partners, and DNA Partners is an early stage venture investment firm. DNA invests in digital media value chain technology companies, not just in the United States of America, but also in China. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you very much, Shara. I'm happy to be here today.
And we are happy to host you.
In San Francisco, California.
That's right. We are all in lockdown, but that doesn't stop life. So I'm glad we get to see each other on Zoom.
Yes, I was glad to meet you at the Idea to IPO conference, I think 2 months ago. So it's been a good
At
journey.
the SAP campus, yes. Yes. Rob has been gracious enough to host these meetups for all aspiring entrepreneurs out there. Joe, DNA Partners has been doing a great job because you are not just investing in the USA, but you have also been investing in China. Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit more about DNA Partners and also about you and your role with DNA Partners?
I would, yes. DNA Partners is a venture firm. We invest in the category of seed round, and in Silicon Valley that would equate to about 50 to 500,000 US dollars in the round, an equity round.
Okay.
We invest in the category, the technology category of digital media value chain technologies, specifically software in the infrastructure of digital media. Our geographies, again, are USA and China, and our portfolio investments are split between the two countries, and it's been a great journey of the two cultures and the valuations, and hopefully for more exits.
Well, yes, let's hope for more exits. However, I did want to ask you one question. You did speak about the seed rounds, and of course, over the past few years, the seed rounds and the investments being made in the seed rounds, they have exponentially increased. But then do you invest the same kind of amount in both US as well as Chinese firms, or is there ever a difference that you see in the amount of investments you're making through seed rounds?
Same round of financial investment, 50 to 500K US, but extremely different valuations.
Extremely different valuations. Okay, got it. Joe, thank you for giving us this information about DNA Partners. I would also love to ask you about your role with DNA Partner and also the history. So where do you come from? And how was DNA Partners formed? And I would definitely love to ask you a little bit more about your background.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for asking. My background has primarily been in the mobile wireless industry since 1993. And you could say that 50% of that was in the United States, and 50% of that has been the United States and Asia.
Okay.
And then there's been for-profit initiatives in my background and nonprofit initiatives in my background. The for-profits have been, I've been an executive of small, medium, and large companies. I've founded 2 companies and had exits in those companies.
Oh, that's great.
Today I'm wearing a hat, because of we're in the coronavirus period, and haven't had a haircut in a few months. So I thought I would wear a hat, and I could promote my first company that I founded called Ice Wireless in 1990. Okay. And we had an exit in the year 2000.
Wow. So that was quick.
Part of my life. So I've worked for big companies and small companies in the United States and in Asia. So I was an executive in South Korea for SK Telecom for for about 3.5 years. And I was vice president of corporate development there. We were making investments in the United States and China. So that's the for-profit, and then the nonprofit is that I've been heavily involved with governments in the United States and governments outside of the United States when it comes to wireless regulations and commerce implementations in other countries. And they've primarily been focused around 3G, 4G, and 5G initiatives. So I've worked closely with the State Department of the United States and the Commerce Department of the United States, and then the ministries in Singapore and Korea and China in regards to their regulations. And then the latest has been that I founded a mobile software developer community here in Silicon Valley and ran it for 16 years. So I'm trying to provide that context for you, because today we'll talk a little bit about the investment community, operations, strategy inside the technology industry, and then how governments participate in the whole ecosystem as well.
Thank you, Joe. That was definitely detailed, and it also gives us an idea about the evolution of telecommunication, and I hope we can touch a little bit about that. So, Joe, since we are on the topic of telecommunications, I want to ask about your stance on 5G. What do you think? Where are we headed to? Where are we headed to in this world of 5G? What do you think are some of the challenges? And how soon do you see the 5G evolution rocking us all?
Rocking us all, I like the phrase. I want to back up to contextualize the past, present, and future in regards to the Gs.
The Gs, yes.
So, my career started with the 3G, and 3G was a breakthrough for getting access to the internet via wireless. Yep. What I really want to highlight is that the Gs are above ground, and so they're wireless. And then we know we have a whole wired infrastructure in the ground. Yes. But the whole transporting data or voice is all physics. So, we know that it works in the ground physically, and we know that it works above the ground physically. And we can only push so much electricity through the air or through the ground, and that it's viable to transport, okay? So in 3G, we were able to do access to the TCP/IP protocol. I'm not going to get too technical, but I think the audience should do a Wikipedia lookup in TCP/IP, because
most of the folks know that.
Very relevant to the 5G discussion. So in 3G, it was voice analog and data digital. It's a big breakthrough for us. And then with 4G, we had all digital, okay? So
better quality.
Could be digital, and broadband, but not broadband to scale necessarily.
That's right.
And we didn't have enough spectrum allocation in 4G from all the different countries, and it was less of a priority. And I want to highlight, in the 4G era, voice could have been digital, could have been TCP/IP, but the mobile operators chose to keep the old way where you dial a telephone number and transport it that way. So they had the choice to do it TDM or TCP/IP. So once again, the Wikipedia lookup, TDM or TCP/IP. And so they chose to use the old way for your voice. With 5G, it's going to be a big breakthrough, because we're going to do voice and data all through TCP/IP. We have more processing power in the network and in the handset to be able to accommodate beautiful quality of service to do that. And then when it comes to the governments, it's a higher priority to allocate the air frequencies or the spectrum to be able to do more bandwidth above the ground. So remember, it's physics again. So you can only push so much voice or data through the air, because it's just a radio. So it's just electricity going through the air, and you have to squeeze it down, and you have to put that in spectrum frequencies. So the governments are now allocating more spectrum for voice and data mobily. And then now, so it's a competition between the countries. So the ministries and the governments are opening up more and more spectrum to compete against each other. So all in all, enterprises and consumers are going to have more viability to broadband. So a broadband above the ground, wireless, and broadband below the ground, wired.
Thank you, Joe. I would like to ask you if you see the 5G revolution impacting how broadband is being used um, in the rural areas today.
Yeah, let's
Because
just apply, we see a lot of TV commercials and we read a lot on the internet in all different capacities, whether it's infrastructure, enterprise, consumer uses for 5G. Let's just apply common sense to that, okay? So wired, you're tethered. You're tethered to a geographical space. Wireless, you're not tethered to a geographical space.
Mhm.
So of course there can be more opportunity because you're mobile. And that could be anything from a cruise ship or an oil tanker, or that's more of an infrastructure type application, to enterprises for police officers. They get more access to broadband instantly and filming, to consumers and new entertainment sources. So once again, let's just apply common sense of what could be connectivity when you're viable mobile and viable with broadband.
Sure. Well, I think I wanted to ask you about the infrastructure itself, right? Because the transmitters, they take a lot of power. And then we have always had concerns about the transmission towers being located across various parts of the cities. And people have always raised concerns about the emissions, because radio frequencies, they are invisible, but
Yeah,
then they are very much there, just because they are like air, right? Even though it's invisible, it's all around you.
yeah.
And historically, because the consumption in rural places hasn't always been in a volume that is profitable to companies, you have fewer towers and hence lesser coverage in these areas. So with 5G, do you see government and the companies making more investment in creating a network that doesn't have holes in it? Or you think they would kind of end up building up on the existing 4G infrastructure?
Well, I want to share with you that there are frequencies bouncing around everywhere as we know it,
Mhm.
whether it's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or
Just the walkie-talkies.
a little satellite on top of the store that's processing your credit cards.
Yes,
So we have personal area networks, we have local area networks, we have metropolitan area networks, and we have wide area
area
networks.
networks. Yep.
Yeah, and then we have satellite networks. So all of those are feeding us, literally, our bodies, frequencies right now.
Mm-hmm.
So when you ask me specifically about 5G and the radiation associated with that, yes, there's different spectrum of radiation that is associated, again, with physics and electricity. So each government around the world has its different parameters around radiation. And we have, the US has fairly high specs for protecting the consumer,
Mm-hmm.
and other countries may not have those specifics that are associated with electricity and how it enters your skin. So I cannot specifically answer your question, but I will generalize that since there's international competition
Mm-hmm.
and consumer interest in broadband above ground and more connectivity and more scale associated with it, then I think there'll be less and less regulation associated with it.
Okay.
That is similar to the analogy of cigarette smoking. So when we
Yes.
started cigarette smoking in the world, was there a lot of regulation around it, or did that incrementally come into place when we learned that it was possibly poisoning our bodies? So
Got it.
we're in a stage right now of, we're in a stage right now of let's do it and see what happens.
So, Joe, we were just talking about how the various regulations, aka our government, plays a huge role in shaping strategies for not just 5G, but I believe they play a huge role in shaping strategy for everything around us, especially the entire startup ecosystem. Would you like to comment on the government's role in strategy building?
I can share macro elements of how governments shape strategy in corporations, whether the corporation's large or small. And I wouldn't say, I can't generalize that all governments dictate, but specifically here, we'll start with the open government of how they shape the strategy of technology. I would say that, the United States is free enterprise, as we know that. So multiple technologies can live in multiple domains, and the government will allow the best one to win, whether that's a marketing campaign that's the best, or the best technology that might win, technological. It's not always the best technology doesn't always win. We have the beta versus VCR example always. I would say that most governments are proactive in dictating which technologies from a macro sense that their citizens and their corporations should use. So that's really the top-down approach. So that definitely shapes how commerce transpires in that country from the top down and the bottom up. So there's pros and cons to the top-down approach of how a government may dictate which protocol to use in a technology, and how the bottom-up of having multiple protocols and multiple new invention protocols made from the bottom upwards. So each has viability, each has pros and cons. I don't really feel that there's a right or wrong at this time. So I want to share with you that typically we're talking about Asia and the United States today. So typically in Asia, large corporations and small corporations don't implement their strategy until the government decides which protocol and standard they could use nationwide.
Okay.
That's a proactive stance. I would say in the United States, it's the opposite. So the government does not dictate which technology and protocol they should use. And there's always little inventions going on of new protocols and standards going on from the bottom up. And so free enterprise shapes it, and then it dictates, it boils down to a few at a time usually. And then the government of the United States decides, okay, we should put regulations around these. So it's a reactive stance. One's proactive government, one's a reactive government.
I think we have seen that with cryptocurrency too, right? The different instances.
Great analogy.
Yes, and I feel in a way, would you say that the reactive stance actually allows for a lot more room in innovation, or you think that either way it doesn't matter?
Up to this date, I think in history, or let's say the last century, it seemed to be that there's more inventions that are commercialized from the free enterprise side. We don't know in the next century, maybe it'll be, the other way. I'm not, of course I don't know. I can't predict the future, but it is a great philosophical trait to think about. And I would like to highlight that China and the United States are always proud of how many patents annually they create and document in their agencies. But we have to look at how many of these patents are commercialized.
That's right. Or else you're just putting money and filing a patent, but you're not really making money out of it.
So bigger is not better when it comes to just how many patents you have in the inventory of your government document.
Yes. How many of them are being, it's just like the Senate, right? That you could end up sponsoring so many bills, but then the ones that actually get enacted, those are the ones that matter.
Yes, correct. Great. Another great example.
All right. So since we are on the topic of government, and thank you so much for explaining the bottom up and the top down approach, because that is something that was new to me as well. And a lot of people don't, you have simplified it in a really nice manner, because a lot of the times people don't understand these differences. And it's great that you and DNA Partners has exposure to two completely different markets, which allows you. to look at both sides. And then, as you said, there are pros and cons to both of the approaches. And thank you so much for sharing those two approaches with folks here, with our listeners. So thank you for simplifying the bottom-up and the top-down approach for our listeners here. And we have been talking about how governments play a role in shaping up the strategies for an entire ecosystem, be it startups or existing companies. With that, I do want to ask you a little bit about the other areas that you, besides telecommunication, that you possibly deal in. So I know DNA Partners, you work in the space of digital media technology, and you deal with some associated business models, especially around infrastructure, enterprise, and consumer. Would you like
Yes.
to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, let's do that. First of all, I'd like to highlight the difference between telecommunications and IP communications.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone says the word telecommunications, it's like nails on a chalkboard for me, because it's really 100-year-old technology that we don't really need anymore. I mean, as far as uh, the way we think about it as an old protocol. When we have the internet now, it's really internet protocol communications. For example, we're on Zoom today. There's no need for a telecommunications number,
That's right.
right? So now we just click on your identity and it automatically pops you up, and it does it through TCP/IP
Mm-hmm.
or voice over IP or
Voice.
video over IP or text over IP. So I would like to share that DNA Partners and myself, we live in the IP communications world of technology, and we're proud to be forward thinking and forward statements associated with that. I would like to share that in digital media specifically, which is a nebulous term, a nebulous phrase, I'll rephrase that. In digital media, which is a nebulous phrase, we think of the categories of digital media in the infrastructure, in the enterprise, and in the consumer domains. And specifically, I'll go reverse in my chronological there. Consumer, we know we have Netflix and Amazon Prime and Bilibili in China, and Tencent, WeChat services. Those are more consumer focused. And then enterprises, we have products like Cisco WebEx or Slack. And we have the Zoom today that we're using, which is primarily for enterprise. And then we have the infrastructure solution sets that are
Let's
based
go
on
again.
transport from end to end. So from the computer server, that stationary warehouse somewhere in a very cool, stable area, to your handset that you're speaking to. So the transport end to end is how the infrastructure solution sets work with digital media. The business models that we talk about and revenue models associated with, let's talk about enterprise and consumer that everyone can relate to. I think we're in a stage, or no, I don't even think, I know we're in a stage where there could be a lot more innovation and a lot more creativity done with business models and revenue models associated with digital media, intangible services
Mm-hmm.
in enterprise and consumer. And I'd like to speak out to the whole entire audience here as it's very evident to me that Silicon Valley is not innovating on business models associated with consumer digital media services. So banner ads with impressions, video clicks, associated with partial video view. And then we have downloads and streaming. I think we can have a lot more. And
I've had those for decades now.
yeah, that's been, since like the company DoubleClick in 1998, coming up with a lot of these business models that Google purchased,
Yeah.
that we can work a lot harder in the world. And Silicon Valley may never get out of its bubble here when it comes to consumer. If we build it, they will come and we'll get advertising impressions and give away the services for free. Well, I think a lot of us know around the world now that free is not free, that we are the products of their companies and that it is not free.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to talk about enterprise. We have companies like Salesforce that are giving a subscription-based value to enterprises, and other, let's say, video, voice and video services that are doing a subscription rate as well, with some hybrid advertising possibly in. I've been speaking to my colleague who is in New York, who works for Madison Avenue advertising agencies, and we came out with 17 business models associated with digital media, business models and revenue models in enterprise and consumer.
Wow.
I'm not going to share those with you today.
Sure.
Challenge the audience to get back to me about new business models associated with digital media, enterprise and consumer. And if you want to shoot me an infrastructure business model, hey, I'm willing to learn and listen.
Well,
but we need a challenge.
We need a challenge, and it seems like you already have a business model figured out, 17 of them to be precise, that are screaming for people to come and take up the challenge. So, Joe, would you like to share with our audience how can they reach out to you in order to pick your brains about these business models and possibly even get your feedback?
I'm glad you asked that, because I'm one of the persons on planet Earth that have chosen not to be a part of social media networks for strategic reasons that I knew too much about them from the conception, about how they run their business, and I don't want to be a part of that business model of free. They could absolutely charge me a monthly subscription to not be part of their advertising-based business models. But they choose not
to
to
not compromise your privacy.
Exactly. I don't want to my security and my privacy. It's both.
True that, both of them. And
I
to
don't
not
need
influence your decisions. We all know.
misinterpreted or misidentified as well. So I don't need speculation about who I am. I'm an open person when I'm face to face, but I don't need to be, having static bios of me or static interpretations and misinterpretations of me. So it has nothing to do with my age demographic or anything like that. Like I said, I've been in the wireless industry for a long time. That's a progressive stance. Doing business in China over 10 years now, that's a progressive stance.
I'm sure we don't doubt how tech savvy you are, but I understand your concerns. I think there is definitely a movement going on even amongst people, especially if you look at just some alternatives to even Google, DuckDuckGo, right, which focuses on privacy. So the community at large might still not identify the threats to their privacy, security, as you speak about it. I mean, I am an avid social media user, so I shouldn't complain about it, but the reasons that you quote, they are very real. And for people who understand those, as you said, the free ecosystem, that's always a concern because nothing in life is free.
Right. I would like to highlight, I was on LinkedIn from 2004 to 2010. From about 2007 to 2010, it was not a benefit to me at all. So I tried to go dormant, but it wouldn't allow me to go dormant. So I had to close my account. I am thinking about getting back on LinkedIn to see how it could enhance my professional life or not enhance my professional life. So as a case study, I'm interested. I may get back on. But to answer your question specifically now, your audience may reach me at joejason@dnapartners.us. JOEJAS as in Sam, IN as in Nancy, at DNA Partners, plural, .us.
Thank you, Joe. We will also be sharing your email ID on our Facebook post that would accompany the show. So, peeps, if you still did not capture the email which Joe really spelled out for us, then feel free to visit our Facebook page, or you could also visit our website. In a week's time from now, the website is rjshara.biz, rjshara.biz. So you have various forums to get access to Joe. And as he mentioned, even though he's not on social media, he is willingly giving away his personal email ID. And that I feel is definitely a much better way to connect than just reaching out on social media. So, Joe, thank you so much for offering that. I hope people take up that challenge, because 17 business models, and this is not coming from someone who's just fresh out of college going around doing some research. I am not. I'm not discrediting those who do that. Even they come up with fantastic ideas, but you have decades of experience backing you up, and you have seen different markets. And even though you focus on US and China, you have definitely paid your dues in other Asian markets, Singapore, etc. So you know a lot about all of these different markets. So I hope that the listeners reach out to Joe and pick his brains on the business models. Sure.
I would like to say that I really have enjoyed doing business in these countries in the past, and I'm going to highlight one for the future. But I've really enjoyed Thailand, Singapore, South Korea. I'll put Hong Kong as its own country in there just for this discussion, not to be politically incorrect.
Sure.
And the Philippines. And I've been getting to know the Philippines a lot better in the last year and a half. And I would like to highlight that DNA Partners is sourcing the Philippines for new initiatives.
Okay, that's good to know, and all the best with that. The Filipinos are definitely hardworking people, and even in the IT industry, they have started leaving their mark. So I hope something really nice comes out of that partnership. And Thailand, Singapore, all of these other countries, including the Philippines, are not just good people to work with, but also very beautiful scenery.
And yes, exactly. I also want to highlight the India and surrounding area. First of all, I want to say that I really enjoy Indian food, Sri Lankan food, Pakistani food. I think it's all wonderful. I enjoy it. I have significant access to it here in downtown San Francisco. So I'm very fortunate that way. And then on that note, that's on a fun note. On a more serious note, I would like to highlight a Sri Lankan born entrepreneur that I highly respect is the CEO of Social Capital. And I would just ask all of you to follow Chamath and his great deep philosophies about the future.
Thank you, Joe. So for those of you who want to follow Chamath, again, it's Social Capital. Try searching for Social Capital, because Chamath does have a spelling that's not that easy to capture. But if you look for Social Capital and you look for Social Capital VC, you are bound to find Chamath's name right up there with all of his profiles for you to go and follow. Joe, one of the most pressing topics today, of course, is COVID-19. It has brought in a lot of changes. And as you're holding up that card right there, right? China and US, I don't know, is there a reason why you have those arrows pointing in opposite directions? Does it indicate the number of cases that are getting reported every day?
I strategically did not put cases on there on purpose. Yes.
So it's open to interpretation.
The press shares with us, the press, quote unquote, shares with us that China case numbers are going down and the US case numbers are going up. And I just wanted to highlight that for our audience of the era that we're in.
Would you like to add more thoughts to it? How do you think COVID-19 is going to impact us?
Well, first, I'd like to take a stance that I take it very seriously. I did from mid-January till now, and in the future. Um, I think it'll impact us as far as a societal wake up and how we take a lot for granted, including
That's right.
technology, and that this is uh, a bio influence and not a technology influence and not a nuclear influence. So I think we really need to highlight that bio affects us just as much as technology affects us, just as much as nuclear war could affect us, and that we all need to be rational, level-headed, respectful citizens of the world, and that we should treat each other equally, and that we should be thankful for what we have and our short time on Earth. We have to remember that we're only on the planet as a human species, as far as ourselves, for 100 years. So I think that the approaches that the governments take are interesting when we look at the way China approaches it with their government and the way the United States approaches it with their government. It's really a significant telltale on maturity. We think of maturity in a sense of that China could be 3,000 years old, and how they internalize disasters, and the United States is around 250 years old, and how we internalize disasters. um, so I just want us to not take every day for granted, and that we can empower each other and respect each other on a daily basis.
Thank you, Joe. I think that message is really important right now, that we get together and fight coronavirus, not each other. So it is important that we empower each other, because at the end of the day, we as a society, we need to come out stronger than the disease. And there are many things that are dividing us. We should hopefully unite against coronavirus and not against each other, unite against coronavirus and make sure that the impact is less. And you are right. You're absolutely right. We have at most 100 years to make an impact. And it would be great if we make a positive impact. With COVID, we have suddenly entered a bear market, and of course, recession is imminent, which means that the industries are presented with new challenges. You have companies that are reacting to it, and not all of them might be able to sustain to this. What do you think about that, Joe?
I think it's a unique era for transparency for us as consumers and us as investors to be able to look into these small, medium, and large corporations, and specifically their executive teams, and we can see which executives are intellectually engaged and executing their way along with the disaster in this unique era. And then we can also see which executives are not intellectually engaged and tend to fall off and go to another place, so to speak. So I think it's a unique time for transparency in viewing executive teams.
Well, that's great. And I feel that would also change the way angel investors and venture capitalists evaluate companies before they take them in their portfolio. So I
That's right.
think the investment landscape is also going to change.
That's right. So we'll be able to. We have more transparency.
We do have more transparency. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for joining us today for the Silicon Dreams and sharing your thoughts on a lot of different things. We spoke about IP communications, and then we did talk about the government's role in shaping strategies for not just the countries, but for the entire ecosystem. And thank you for your lovely message on COVID-19, how we need to empower each other at this time. So thank you so much for your time today, Joe. I appreciate. We were glad to have you here on the show. And folks, once again, remember you can reach out to Joe at joejason@dnapartners.us, especially if you want to get a crack at the 17 business models that he already has figured out for the enterprise and the consumer space in digital media technologies. So, Joe, thank you again. It was a pleasure having you here at the Silicon Dreams on Radio Zindagi 1170 AM. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. I appreciate your time and energy.